Hello everybody and welcome to Tip Tuesday from Sweet Beads in Las Vegas, Nevada. Hey everybody, it's Shae. Welcome back to Tip Tuesday, and today we're talking beading needles. There are a wide variety of sizes and types of beading needles, and we're going to go over some of the most common kinds today. As you can see, they come in a variety of sizes. This is a 10. That's an 11, that's a 12. Remember that the larger the number, the thinner the needle. So a size 10 needle is thicker than a size 12 needle will be. And they do come in shorts or longs. I happen to have a preference for the long needles because I can load up more beads without them falling off the end. But some people like the short needles, and they are good for weaving in small ends and through tighter spaces. Most of us start off with an English beading needle. They're a good quality needle at a very inexpensive price. Their drawbacks seem to me to be the fact that they do bend easily. So if you're going through tight spaces on say a peyote with delicas, you may end up with a curvy needle. They also have a tendency to break more often. I've snapped a lot of needles going through tight work again. And but they're inexpensive, so you can replace them rather easily. As you become more proficient and you want a better quality needle, I do recommend going up to the tulip needles. They're made in Japan. They're very tough needles. I have only broken one, and it's because I was doing something that you shouldn't be using a beading needle for. And they don't curve. I've done lots of Delica peyote stitch work with them in very tight corners, and they're a sturdy needle. Even though they are more than double the price of an English beading needle, I prefer them because I can use them 4 times as long without the problems of breaking and bending. Remember, if you're using Fireline, which is my go-to thread, you're going to flatten the end of your Fireline with a pair of pliers or with a pair of tweezers. Make sure it's nice and flat, and then it should thread very easily into your needle. But sometimes we have visual problems, so it's very difficult for us to see the eye of the needle. Or you may be using a thread or fiber that does not thread easily through the eye of a needle. For example, if you're using monofilament, which I do use on certain projects, or Eslon, say I'm loading up beads onto Eslon for Kumihimo, then you're going to switch to a big eye needle. And what a big eye needle is, let's see if I can do this one-handed. Whoops. It's kind of 2 needles, there we go, soldered together on the ends, and then the whole middle becomes a big giant eye, and it will accommodate a wide variety of threads. You can thread this with really thick fiber, or you can thread it with, like as I said, monofilament, things like that, and you can use it with just regular thread, but it's much easier to see the whole of that needle than it is to see the eye of the tinier needles. Just remember that it is pointy on both ends, so if you're like me and you have a tendency to stab yourself, you're now going to be twice as likely to stab yourself. But it's a great alternative if you have trouble seeing or have trouble threading your needles. Now, beading needles also come in specialty types. These are some English Glover's needles, and a Glover's needle is great when you are working with leather. It has a little kind of angled point that allows you to pierce leather easily, and so it's easier to bead with that. Speaking of piercing, the other reason I like the tulips is that it's a slightly, ever so slightly more blunt end. It's still sharp, don't get me wrong, but it's a slightly more blunt end, so it doesn't pierce thread quite as easily as the English have a tendency to do. So if you're using a thread like Nymo where you pierce your thread and then you have to back something out and you've pierced your thread and you can't get your stitch back out, you might want to consider switching to the tulips, because I have a far less problem with that than I do with the other sizes. So That's it for needles. I did not discuss needles from China or India because I think their quality is very low, but they are so cheap. So if you don't mind working with a super, super cheap needle that, will definitely bend, will definitely break, but they're pennies, then you can go ahead and use those. But I really do recommend starting off, if you don't want to invest in the tulips until you get pretty good, invest in some decent English beading needles. They're not very expensive and they'll get you through your project very easily. So that's it for needles. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them for us. We love to hear back from you. And again, you can find us online at sweetbeadslv.com, on Facebook, on Twitter, and Pinterest, and on Instagram using sweetbeadslv. So have a great week, and until next Tip Tuesday, happy beading. And don't forget to purchase all of your beads, thread, needles, supplies. Check us out at sweetbeadslv.etsy.com.